All right. We are live. Welcome in, everybody. I'm going to just, retweet my live stream, and then we will get started. Oh, my goodness. All right. Hopefully, everybody is doing good today. We're just waiting for everybody to file on in. Oh, wait. I think that I messed this up. Let me see something here real fast. I believe this is supposed to be episode 145, and I think I put 144. So let me go ahead and fix that right quick before we get into this. Let's see. Yep, two 144s. Classic. 145. All right. Sorry about that, everybody. Sorry about that. Oh, hello from England, 1 a.m. Welcome in from England, my man. Remember, guys, if you are just getting in here, throw up where you're at. I always like to see where we're listening from. All right. Okay. Got everything started up. Hopefully everybody's doing good today. We have quite a few updates to talk about. Remember, guys, if you would like to ask questions, you can do so at any time. Throw it up in the chat. I might get to it. If you want your question answered absolutely, you can always donate through super chats, and I get to every single one of those questions. I never leave one of those out. So remember that you guys can always do that. Tucson, Texas, Hades, that's my dog's name. Idaho, beautiful British Columbia. Welcome from beautiful British Columbia. It is a beautiful place. I have family that lives there. Houston, upstate New York. Nice, guys. Italy, it's late. It's late for my Euro bros. Good to see some of you in here, though. Arizona, nice. All right, guys. Well, we can just go ahead and hop into the updates then. Welcome in. This is episode 145. If it says 144, that's not correct. It will be changed. I already changed it, I think, but for me, it still says 144. So episode 144 of Kalibrated with Scott. I am Scott, of course. We have quite a bit to talk about today in terms of updates, and then a little bit to talk about in geopolitics and stuff like that. So we can go ahead and just jump right into it. Remember, guys, if you have things that you would like me to discuss as well, you can throw them up and I might touch on them. Vaughan, Ontario, or Vaughan, Ontario, Arizona. Nice, guys. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at it. All right, so we have a few updates to cover today. In the Kursk region here, fighting still continues in Gievo over here. There is a good amount of fighting in this area. The Ukrainians are not leaving this little piece of territory right here. There's also still Ukrainian presence along this border region right here. Kind of just think of this area as sort of connected. This is still one little front right here. Ukrainians are still fighting in this area, and we are still getting videos of Ukrainian logistics going into the Kursk region along these roads. There have been multiple drone nets. I imagine there's probably one in this area right here, anti-drone nets along the road. The Russians just fly the drones into the drone tunnel, basically the anti-drone tunnel, and just sit on the ground and wait for Ukrainian vehicles or infantry to approach, and then they take off and they just hunt. It's like an ambush. There's ambush FPVs that line these roads now. So still a ton of Ukrainian losses in the Kursk region. The fighting there continues. It makes no sense why it's continuing. But, the Ukrainians are going to hold on to every little inch that they have everywhere. That is their MO. So fighting does continue in this area, and the Kursk incursion has not yet been pushed out. I believe that's the entire point, is to say that the Ukrainians still maintain some presence in Kursk, although at this point it really doesn't. I mean, it never benefited them, but at this point, even from like a propaganda perspective, it truly just, it's nothing that they're controlling. So doesn't make a lot of sense there. But coming over here to the Sumy region, the entirety of Vasilivka has been captured by Russian forces. So again, another village in the Sumy region. The Russians now control 1, 2, 3 villages in the Sumy region, compared to the 2 villages in the Kursk region that the Ukrainians control. So just from a from a number perspective, the Russians control more settlements in the Sumy region than the Ukrainians control in the Kursk region now. All right. Let me think. We have seen a ton, and I mean, I'm talking like in the city of Sumy itself, probably 10 to 20 glide bombs a day. I've been noticing 5 to 10 Iskander strikes a day in this region, usually. There has been so much deep striking going on, and also the Russians are now using Garand 2 drones for much more tactical style strikes. So still deep strike, something that you would use an Iskander for, or something like that, but not, Western Ukraine. We're not seeing the drones fly over into Lvov or anything as much anymore. We're seeing a lot of them striking like troop concentrations and stuff like that in the Sumy region. And in fact, in the Kiev region here, we had a Garand 2 strike that killed a UAV crew, a UAV team with some commanders and stuff in it. So these Garand 2 strikes have been putting in a lot more work than they previously were, at least as far as I could tell from damage reports and stuff like that. So, all right, moving out of the Sumy region now, over to the Oskol bridgehead. Let me see. Hello, everybody. All right, moving over to the Oskol bridgehead. It was actually reported that Krasny Pershi here has come under Russian control. So this will be changed to green now for Russian control. You guys just saw that. I wanted to do that one live on the air. So Krasny Pershi now under Russian control. And moving down just south of Zapadne here, Russian forces have advanced and captured this fortification, which is just north of Kupiansk. There's really only one remaining fortification along the road before the Russians reach Kupiansk. It is likely that the battle for Kupiansk will begin soon. I mean, the Russians are at the doorstep, and the Russians really want to cut off supply into this little bridgehead here. Once this bridgehead closes, the Russians will be able to occupy western Kupiansk, which will level the front out along the Oskol River. And then that basically removes a giant chunk of frontline that is disrupting logistics down to Severodonetsk and this area. See, so logistics still comes in through this area. However, gaining control of this side of the Oskol, and especially getting control of Kupiansk, will greatly improve Russian logistics in this entire front right here. So this is an important advance. Russian forces are about to enter the village of Krindashivka, just north of Kupiansk. All right. Everybody doing good? All right. All right. Here on the Luhansk Donetsk border, you can see this is the Luhansk Oblast. This is the Donetsk Oblast. And then Kharkiv is up here. Russian forces continued to expand their bridgehead across the Zhibiets River here. There was a small crossing up here in Makivka, a larger crossing down here over across from Terny and Ivanivka. Russian forces have now combined these bridgeheads, and now this bridgehead has become a massive crossing over the Zhibiets. Remember that this area is very important because if the Russians are to advance, let's just say it wouldn't have to be all the way. If the Russians can get into Kaprivka here, which is 5 miles away ish, right? If they can establish themselves in this general area, they are going to cut off logistics up to basically Barova and this entire pocket here. And so something that I thought was going to happen quite some time ago, the Russians chose southern Donetsk to focus over the Oskol bridgehead region. But now what we are about to see is the Russians apply maximum pressure across this entire front right here, from Senkivka and Kupiansk all the way down to the Liman area, put an extreme amount of pressure on this bridgehead and force the Ukrainians out to the eastern edge of, or the western side of the Oskol. And once that happens, remember, once that happens, if the Russians can put pressure on Liman, they will gain control of the forest right here, which will then help them collapse the Seversk salient. Once the Seversk salient is collapsed, then the Russians will be poised all from basically from the Oskol river down to Seversk area right here, poised to push into Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. All right. Moving down to the Toretsk region. To the north of Toretsk, Russian forces have established themselves across the canal here, from Druzhba up to Ozaranivka. This is just a, not a major update, but an important one, because establishing a presence across the canal here is the more difficult part for the Russians. So they now have that established, and the push towards Konstantinivka begins. In Toretsk itself, I have removed the Ukrainian presence in this area. The Ukrainians have been now forced out of Toretsk. That little adventure that they were going on over the last month or so has come to an end with higher Ukrainian losses and nothing to show for it. So, the battle for Toretsk has reconcluded. It sort of had concluded, and then the Ukrainians decided that they were going to counterattack into the city, and those counterattacks now seem to be at an end. All right, moving down just south of Toretsk, we have the Suka Balka area right here, this little village. In the last update, I talked about Oleksandropol and Pentelenimanivka, both coming under Russian control. The advances in this area have continued. And specifically, I've been extremely cautious in this area. I've talked about it multiple times. The Ukrainians have some serious fortifications in this region right here. Remember, it's just north of Avdiivka. So this is really kind of old territory almost compared to the rest of the front now. This area has some pretty significant fortifications. So any Russian movement in this area is notable. And especially because there has been consistent Russian movement in this area where, this village was captured, then this village was captured, and then we continue to see advances out of this area. And specifically, the Russians captured a fortification in this area right here and have captured a fortification along the highway right here. So there is actually kind of a larger possibility now that the Russians will be able to advance into these two villages right here, Valentinivka and Sukabalka, capture them, and then advance towards this coffee shop right here. And I know it sounds funny, but I'm just using because it's just a little coffee icon. But if you zoom in, you can see that this is no ordinary coffee shop here. This is the coffee shop of a World War I trench line. You get a little dirt in your coffee, whatever. But this is just a fortification area along the road. And so if the Russians can basically blitz up this highway and capture this fortification, or blitz out from Sukabalka and capture this fortification, they'll be able to isolate all of the fortifications in this region. And then you will see the entire front line sort of level out from Vadyan right here all the way to Toretsk. It's just, the front line will just level, and then all of the focus will be put onto Konstantinivka. I think that this is the Russian plan now, just because the Ukrainians are getting very weak across the board. So there are certain areas where the Ukrainians have, quote unquote, stabilized. There's been a lot of talk about Toretsk being stabilized, which it was never really unstable for the Ukrainians. The Russians made like semi-consistent progress here, but nothing major. But the big one was this area of Pokrovsk. And according to Ukrainian sources, this is the only area of the front that exists. If you listen to Ukrainian sources talk about the situation in Ukraine, they talk about how the Kursk region fell and blah, 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 whatever. But in the east, it's all been stabilized, right? And that's not the truth. And we know that's not the truth. You've been watching my show long enough. I do live streams at least once a week, usually more. And you guys know that the Russians, I always come on here and I show you guys Russian advances. So the front has not stabilized. There has been no stabilization except in this one particular area where the Ukrainians have the shortest logistics out of a major city, and the Russians have to basically cross through fields to advance in this area. And yet they're still not being forced back. So the Ukrainian attacks are not strong enough, obviously, to remove Russian presence. And the Russians are just in a position where they have to wait for the rest of the front line to sort of catch up, or for another thing like Kursk to happen, an event that draws a sizable chunk of the Ukrainian armed forces in that area away so that the Russians can then progress. I don't think that's going to happen because Pokrovsk and Minharad right now are like an absolute must for the Ukrainian defense. They have to keep this. The Russians cannot gain access to this. If the Russians gain access to this, they will be able to push in every single direction, and it will be explosive because there are no defenses behind Pokrovsk. So this is an area that will probably not be captured by the Russians for a good amount of time. And it could actually be one of the areas that holds for so long that it ends up being encircled like other areas. Because the Russians will just continue to advance in other directions and create other problems for the Ukrainians. One of those directions in particular is the southern Donetsk area. So we're going to talk about that now. All right. Love what you do, man. Many. Oh, I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys being in here. Thank you, B Games. I appreciate your support. You guys make this worthwhile for me. Not the money and stuff. I do appreciate that. I love you guys for that. It helps me out so much. But just you guys being in here and watching is awesome. That's why I like to come in and do it. So I appreciate you guys being in here. All right. Okay, moving down. So sort of what I talked about, or sort of what the title of my episode today is, a new Russian oblast. I've talked about this for some time, and we are now approaching the moment of truth, I would say. There are ongoing negotiations between the U.S. and Russia. I don't see those working out. I've made my point on that multiple times. I think that I'm gonna talk about that here in just a second. There was another meeting between Russian and U.S. Diplomats in Washington. So we're going to talk about that today. But dropping any idea of a ceasefire until it happens. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I'm going to keep focusing on the military aspects and the political aspects related to military events. So as you can see here, Russian forces have advanced quite significantly towards the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast here. They have advanced south of Kotelorivka. They have captured oh my God, here we go, Preobrazhenka and Bondanivka down here. So they have captured two settlements or two villages right up against the border and have advanced south of this village. Now, if you look here, there's only a reservoir, right? Small field in the way. Not much here stopping the Russians from reaching the border. There are some villages down here which are going to be more difficult for the Russians to progress through. However, we are now looking at less than 2 miles, so less than 3-4 kilometers from the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast on this portion of the front. And the entire front is moving in this direction too. So it's not just one little spearhead. As you see down here, the Russians continue to advance in these directions. So a lot of things are happening here. And this is the area. It's so funny because they talk about how the Pokrovsk front is stable. I guess this is not technically the Pokrovsk front down here. However, it is less than 20 kilometers from the Pokrovsk front, and the Russians are seeing advancements every day. So, yeah, I don't know why the talk of a stable front in the east for the Ukrainians is being spread, because that is not the situation at all. All right, moving down to the Constantinople and Drivka area, Russian forces have captured the village of Rozliv right here. This is important because it will give them a springboard to assault into Batyr. What I like to look at here is how the map has changed so much, and I point this out sometimes, but when we're looking at the map, Batyr and this fortification are sort of what Ugledar were, right? Except not as strong. So if we zoom back out here, here's Ugledar. Here it was the sort of the crux along the road. It protected this entire area. That is what Batyr is now, except it's not built up the same way, and it's not going to be as defensible. It has a river to the north. It's a difficult area to hold. But just in terms of how the map is moving, it's like an L, and it's just going this way. So the Russians are still making plenty of advances, and in particular, in this area alone, the situation for the Ukrainians is critical, and it's getting worse and worse every day. They don't have stable logistics. They don't have really strong fortifications. And as you can see, if the Russians can achieve any sort of breakthrough like this red right here into the village, then the entire line ends up shifting. And we're going to see more and more of this. The battles for Oleksivka and Batyr should start relatively soon. And I'm going to talk about I've talked about this pocket that will form here, but with the recent advances, you can really begin to see how this is going to take shape. So not so much the Oblast itself, Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, but the road right here that runs from Novopavlivka down to Dashane. This is the road that the Russians are trying to cut. So the Oblast border is not really that's more important for us to know what the Russian objectives are. Are the Russians just going to continue into a new Oblast and create another diplomatic issue when it comes to the resolution of this conflict? Because if the Russians are in the Sumy region, they're in the Kharkov region. If there's a deal struck currently with the Istanbul plus under Istanbul plus concessions, the Russians would probably end up leaving this area and this area unless they said that they were going to have a buffer zone. But again, I don't see how Ukraine agrees to that. And then they would also have to leave obviously the Oskol bridgehead, this area, all of this right here. This is all Kharkov. So they would have to leave this because this would not be included, likely. They have not annexed the Kharkov region. And then if they were to enter Dnipropetrovsk, then they would also have to come up with an agreement to leave this oblast, right? Or there would be a general agreement that the Russians would leave all the oblasts that they do not currently, that they have not annexed, the 4 regions. Can you see how there's just too many problems in the way for peace to be achieved? It's like it's just too many things going on. There's too many issues to be addressed that no side really wants to address. And again, we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but that's why this is important from a political standpoint. Once the Russians cross this line, they have a new bargaining chip, I guess you would say, like the same way that the Ukrainians thought Kursk was going to be for them. The Russians, once they enter this new oblast, they will basically be like, well, we're going to have to leave this oblast now. So, it might improve their negotiating position if there were to be negotiations. I'm not saying that that's the case, but from a military standpoint, not a political standpoint, the goal for the Russians is to cut this road right here. If this road can be cut, then this entire string of settlements right here will be put into a much worse situation logistically. Remember that the Vovocha River separates these top villages from these bottom villages down here. So there is a river crossing in between, and logistics being cut here would basically collapse this entire pocket north of Vovocha, right? So if the Russians can push out, cut this road, then this pocket north of the river will quickly wrap up for the Russians. If the Russians similarly down here in the south, as you can see, they have captured the village of Vesele and continued to improve out of Velika Novosilka. If they can continue up to Komar and Pribudovo, then they will cut the southern logistics route, and that means that Odrane and Batir will both be cut off from logistics. So both are kind of necessary. You want to cut both, but as we can see here, there is a bridge over the Vovocha River. This bridge is no longer in existence. There is another bridge. Let me see. There's another bridge up in this area. Yeah, right here. This bridge has also been destroyed, and I'm pretty sure this dry crossing has been removed. The Russians have been hitting the Vovocha River very hard with glide bombs and stuff. So this entire pocket is being strangulated right now, and it will eventually. Actually, let me go ahead and put a. I'll make a new line so we can see exactly what I'm talking about here. So the Russians are going to want to come in and cut this basically, and cut this here, and then this entire pocket falls to the Russians. And this is not going to be clean. I'm not making it clean. I'm just putting it up so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Boom, like that. So that entire area is basically what we're talking about being cut off logistically from just these 2 roads being cut right here. Okay. Okay. All right. Last update here that we'll get into. Down in the Zaporizhzhia region, just a small update here. Russian forces have captured the village of Lubkove, which not overly significant, but it may lead them into Kamyanske here eventually. I don't really think that the goal is necessarily in this area. I think the goal was to get access to this road right here, which will lead to the high ground north of Orakhiv, which will allow them to cut off logistics into the city. But yeah, so a small change over on this front line. Nothing overly dramatic, though. All right. Okay, guys. I am done with my updates. If you guys have some questions, you can go ahead and throw some questions up there. I'm always down to talk and read and see what's going on. I did want to talk about the I'm gonna try to see. I had a little snippet of the uh, conversation that the Russian diplomatic team had with the U.S. diplomatic team in um, Washington today. Let's see. Okay, so here's the main points. It was Dmitriev was in Washington today, and he had a small negotiation with representatives of the Trump administration. And this is what he said on those talks. The Trump administration is constructive and behaves respectfully in its dialogue with the Russian Federation. Significant progress has been made on a ceasefire agreement in Ukraine. Russia and the United States are discussing restoration of direct flights. The Trump administration hears Russia's position. U.S. companies are ready to occupy niches left by European companies that have left Russia. The dates for new negotiations between Russia and the United States will be determined in the near future. So what that sounds like to me is not so much a ceasefire being any progress being achieved on the ceasefire front. I don't see anything there that reflects that at all. I mean, I could be missing stuff from the conversations, but respect is not. It is a part of negotiations, but that's not really. I mean, just being respectful. I feel like that's like bare minimum stuff. I don't really. I don't see this as being anything particularly meaningful. I could be wrong. We could have a ceasefire tomorrow, but what this sounds like to me is more like diplomatic relations being restored between the U.S. and Russia that were heavily damaged during the Biden administration, going all in on the Ukraine project. Obviously, the Trump administration is not all in on the Ukraine project. They're trying to get a ceasefire, trying to buy Ukraine some time, this, that, and the other. And they just don't care. So, getting companies back in Russia, getting flights opened up, these are things that don't really matter. They should never really have ended. But since they have, the Trump administration can use these little gestures to show goodwill towards the Russians and achieve a ceasefire. I think that it's a farce. I think that everything that you're seeing the U.S. try to accommodate when it comes to this ceasefire is all the bare minimum, little nothing. Like they're just solving the problems that they've created originally. So it's not like they're actually going a step further to show that they're ready to have negotiations or meaningful talks on a ceasefire. They're just getting rid of the little annoyances that developed over the last 3 years between the U.S. and Russia. No airlines flying into each other's countries and stuff like that. Not the big issues like stopping sending intelligence and weapons to Ukraine and reducing sanctions on Russia and all of the things that actually matter. So I think that, again, both sides are just kind of dragging each other along, and neither side is going to actually achieve anything significant. Yeah, and just to give you guys sort of a little snippet of what Zelensky's been talking about. So the Trump administration came out after this and said that I think it was Trump himself came out and said that in his opinion, both Zelensky and Putin are ready for negotiations. I don't know what that means. What does ready for negotiations mean? Because all sides are ready for negotiations. They're just not ready for concessions. So this double language, trying to convince everybody that that we're this close to a ceasefire, it's very weird to me. It doesn't make a ton of sense. But I'm just going to go down and tell you guys what Zelensky said. Okay, let me see. I can go over. Hold on. Here we go. Okay, so Zelensky has made further statements regarding a potential ceasefire in Ukraine and what will happen to the AFU after hostilities cease. So this was yesterday. No, yeah. Well, this morning, I can't remember if the article came out this morning or yesterday. It doesn't really matter, but within the last 24 hours, Ukraine will not reduce the size of its military and will, in fact, continue to increase and improve it. These are direct quotes from him, by the way. And Ukraine will never recognize former Ukrainian territories that Russia is now in control of, not including but not limited to Sumy, Kharkiv, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, the DPR, the LPR, and Crimea. So that's the starter for Russia, right? That is the bare minimum for Russia in terms of starting negotiations. And Zelensky just basically said the two things you need us to do, not, he's basically talking about continuing mobilization during a ceasefire, strengthening the military so that the Russians can't do this again. That's the exact opposite of what the Russians require to start negotiating for a ceasefire with the Ukrainians. And the last part of this little thing that I put in here, it's clear that Zelensky must be removed and replaced before a ceasefire can be achieved. Both of the points made above are the exact opposite of the Russian non-negotiables to start talks. I wonder if Zelensky will regret not taking a deal, or if he truly just doesn't care about Ukraine at all. And I had a couple of my, I have some very particularly not smart people that follow me and comment regularly. And this little fishy is one, little Swedish fishy right here. He says, I just thought this was funny. How is Russia going to remove him? They tried in February 2022. They didn't. Failed and retreated from Kiev. Okay. Big talk, no show, sad. And then I just said, Russia? What? Russia? Why would Russia want Zelensky out? Have they been trying to assassinate him for years? Because I haven't seen that. All I've seen is the West try to achieve a ceasefire, right? Is Russia the one that's demanding negotiations? Are they the one that's saying that negotiations have to happen? Are they the ones, it's only the US, right? Europe isn't really talking about negotiations and a ceasefire in the same way. They're talking about introducing troops into Ukraine if a ceasefire is achieved. It's really only the US that's pushing for this ceasefire. So they say, so it's like, I said Russia, and then another guy says, hold on. Another guy says, quite delusional if you think Ukrainians would remove Zelensky for someone who would dismantle the armed forces. It's common opinion that this is the only security guarantee against Russia. Again, it's not, because you're already been invaded and you're actively losing the war. So no, or for Ukraine is. But then I just said Ukrainians because again, they really don't. It's like these people are just so delusional to think that, first off, Putin wants Zelensky removed. No, Zelensky is the perfect person in that position. He's an absolute moron who pisses everybody off around him. He can be used and played like a fiddle by the Russians all the time. The Russians do not want him out. The Ukrainians don't have a say. So the Ukrainians don't get to choose anything ever anyway. The only people who could actually, well, the Russians could potentially remove Zelensky, but the only people who want to remove Zelensky right now is the United States. They're the only ones who are trying to achieve a ceasefire, at least the theatrics of it, with very little chance of success because of that obstacle in their way. So, yeah. All right. All right, guys. If you have some questions, go ahead and get some questions in. That is all I had to talk about today. That's updates. And yeah. Do you think the AFU will make a lightning push towards the ZPP before a ceasefire? No. So the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is kind of like a fortress now. The Russians have spent a lot of time bolstering the defenses in that area. It's literally probably one of the most difficult areas to capture now for the Ukrainians, even with its proximity to the front. The Russians have the ability to respond immediately with air support. It's going to be practically impossible for the Ukrainians to get in there. Now, could they go for a lightning dash for it? They've tried it 3 times already, and the Brits are obsessed with it. So I have no doubt in my mind that that is a distinct possibility. Yes. Krillid Crisis. Thank you. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Dima, by the way, is stupid for thinking that in the conventional sense. Like, do you mean like a missile attack or something like that? I wouldn't put anything past the Ukrainians. I wouldn't. If the Ukrainians start losing really bad, I think that they're going to sabotage their own nuclear facilities. So, yeah. Let's see. Question: do you ever talk to your family members about the Ukraine war? What are their views? Yeah, I talk to my dad about it all the time. They're just they don't, I mean, they don't particularly care. They're like all Americans. They have their own stuff going on. My dad, he's pretty politically inclined. So, I mean, they like understand what I'm talking about. I can have a full conversation with them. I can go in depth with all of this stuff. I don't talk to my sister or my brother that often about it. I don't see them that much. They live in different states. So, and my parents live in a different state too. So, I mean, as much as you talk to your family about anything else, yeah, I talk to them. Their view is very third person, very cold on the whole thing. I mean, like Ukraine is like so abstract for most Americans. They don't like the killing, but outside of that, I mean, they don't think our money should be going over there. My dad's kind of like a Canadian hippie a little bit. He used to be much more liberal before. I mean, he's still the exact same amount of liberal, but now that's like almost center right compared to what it was. So he was against Vietnam. He was against, or his parents literally drove to Canada and gave birth to him in Canada so that he wouldn't be drafted. He was born in 65, so he was never really going to be drafted for Vietnam, but it was happening at the time. And my grandma just wanted to get him out of there. So yeah, they went full hippy dippy in the 70s there with my dad. But he's pretty anti-war. He was very anti-Iraq when it was happening before the whole WMD lie came out and everything. Like he was very anti-interventionalist. And for good reason, because it didn't help anything. Are you going to do any future map updates for Iran, Taiwan? Yes. If there are any major conflicts that spur out right now, I will probably cover them along with Ukraine. I don't really have any interest in covering like the stuff going on in Africa, like in Sudan or Libya or anything like that. I have no interest. It's been going on and it's going to continue going on for forever. So not anything like that. But if there is another major conflict that breaks out, especially if it involves the U.S., I will definitely be covering it. Yes. Taiwan, Iran, Venezuela. If anything happens, Venezuela, that was some mean bush. Yep. I will definitely be covering that. My God, I just swallowed water. Excuse me. All right. I'm crying. How does the U.S. keep on surviving, basically losing every war since World War II? They didn't really lose Korea. Korea was just Korea was a win because they saved South Korea. It should have been lost, honestly. They saved South Korea and they established a permanent reason to stay on the Korean Peninsula and keep an eye on China. So and Russia and be in that area of the Pacific and stay in Japan. And it gave them a really good excuse to maintain presence in the Pacific. So, or in the Asian Pacific. So I don't really think Korea was necessarily a loss. I mean, if you want to talk about like the tactical aspects of it, there was losses in the war, but Vietnam again. This was the idea of containment. Vietnam was a failure, but the Vietnam War doesn't. A lot of these wars, the thing that you have to understand about these wars that the U.S. are fighting, these are not existential, basically, right? So sorry, my girlfriend just got home. This is non-existential for the United States. Vietnam was not existential outside of like the Cold War, right? If they would have gotten, I mean, they did completely lose, but if there would have been a complete disaster in Vietnam, way worse than what we saw, a complete boondoggle, it still does not affect the overall status of the United States because Vietnam is so distant and far removed from, that issue. Iraq, we didn't lose Iraq. We won Iraq, right? We did. We overthrew Saddam. We did what we went in there to do, and then we decided to stay because we wanted to establish our presence in the region. And then we lost. We lost the Hearts and Minds campaign, not the actual war. But yeah, you don't have to win wars. That's the thing is wars and battles do not have to be won for you to be the victor. You can lose every battle in a war and still come out on top just because of the equation beneath it, right? If you have more manpower, more equipment, more ammunition, and you lose every single battle against a smaller, less equipped enemy, you can still be victorious in the war, right? So that's sort of the idea. You have to look at it from a U.S. position. The U.S. goes into these sort of police actions or wars, whatever you want to call them, with a certain goal in mind. That goal eventually shifts and transitions, and then this is just sort of what happens with empires, right? We saw the British do this. We saw the Romans do this. It's actually what ends up killing empires is this massive overextension. But I don't really think of those as losses. Afghanistan, you can consider it a loss, but it bought us 20 years in the region, right? You know how much heroin we smuggled out of Afghanistan over 20 years? Do you know how much money and how many other worldly events were affected by the U.S. presence in Afghanistan? It's the same with Syria. Like you can say that like the U.S. lost in Syria, but Assad was overthrown, Israel's expanding, and Turkey is controlling the northern portion of the country. Iran has effectively been defeated in Syria, right? So this is like, and I'm not saying Assad was Iran, but Assad was Iran's connection to Hezbollah through Syria. So I don't think that these are necessarily losses. I think that you have to look at the overarching themes instead of the individual events. Thank you for your question. The Cuban Missile Crisis was existential for the U.S. And what happened with the Cuban Missile Crisis? When an event is existential for the United States, who comes out on top? Right? So that's what you got to remember is Vietnam was not existential, Iraq was not existential, Afghanistan was not existential, right? As soon as there is an existential conflict, you will see the U.S. shift into gear really quick. Yeah. Bro, Saddam was a friend of the CIA. That is literally the definition of a place you don't want to be. The friend of the CIA. That is not a good place to be. If you're in the CIA, that's good. You do not want to be a friend of the CIA. Friends of the CIA do not have particularly long lifespans. Let's see. All right, guys, if you have any more questions, get them in. I am almost done with everything that, I am done with everything that I want to talk about. So I thought the U.S. proxies won in Syria. No, the U.S. proxies in Syria would be the Kurds. If you want to talk about NATO proxies, I mean, there's Turkish, like HTS is who took over, right? And I don't really necessarily know what all of the connections that are there, but the second HTS got in, Jolani and HTS were removed from the terrorist designation. So to me, it does look like the U.S. won in Syria. And winning in Syria, though, again, here's the thing, right? Is the U.S. won in Syria, or the West won in Syria, right? But what are you creating in Syria? There's a power vacuum, right? You have Israel now striking Damascus, striking different areas of Syria, invading the country, taking over more territory. You have a chaos between these different sides, and it might all level out and be smooth in Syria. But I have a feeling that particular area is in desperate need of a very stable force, and instead of that, they have basically a war going on between different sides in Syria, and that's just not going to be conducive for long-term stability. So, realistically, how many armored vehicles does the AFU have left? No idea, dude. Nobody knows. Nobody knows how many have been delivered. Nobody knows how many have been lost, how many have been recovered, put back into service, lost again. You don't know. Just I would put any ideas like that out of your brain, because it just doesn't matter. You just have no idea. Nobody knows. And anybody who's trying to give you an answer is lying to you. They don't know. Realistically, how many men does Ukraine have left? Now, this is a question that can actually be answered, not a specific number. We don't know, but not enough, right? The Ukrainians seem to be doing fine in terms of tanks and armored vehicles still. They're just continuously getting fed stuff from the West. But what they're not being fed is manpower. And you can see the criticality of Ukrainian manpower across the battlefield. What is the significance of the Hungary-Serbian military alliance when they're landlocked? I honestly don't know. I haven't looked at that at all. Most of those things are just very surface level and don't really mean much. So I don't know. I'll take a look at it. But I haven't heard anything major about it, so I don't think it's really that big of a deal. Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but the U.S. already said that the ICC it doesn't matter. They tried to make it a big deal when it was about Putin, and then the second the ICC leveled a warrant against Netanyahu, the U.S. said the ICC has no jurisdiction. So, yeah, no, there's nothing. I haven't. There are videos of Russian Telegram channels showing women and kids. I haven't seen kids, unless you mean kids 18 to 24. I call those men. They're boys. They're young men, but they're still men technically. But yes, I have seen women. A lot of women being used in assault units now. Not a good sign. Any potential massive Russian breakthrough on the horizon? Yeah. I have two areas where I'm kind of keyed in. So right here, I think that the Russians could definitely make a breakthrough here towards this road, which would cut off this entire area, and then the entire front will move up and sort of level out. It'll look really weird. It'll look like a bulge from Velika Novosilka all the way up to Pokrovsk, and that's going to completely change the landscape of this conflict. That advance right here, just cutting off this entire area. Another area I think we could see a Russian breakthrough, and some serious advances is here in the Oskol region. I think that this northern Kharkov area is ripe for a Russian offensive. I think if negotiations sort of stall out here, we will see a Russian offensive in this area. Just basically connecting the Oskol bridgehead to this incursion zone here, and using the Zaporizhzhia Donetsk river and reservoir sort of thing right here as the border line, cutting the bridge right here, isolating this entire pocket, and then advancing across the border and over the Oskol River, and just putting maximum pressure on this northern Kharkov pocket. I think that is the area that I would probably go on if I were the Russians. But the Russians seem more inclined to just continue slow pushes and attriting the Ukrainians because it's a winning formula. This is something that I'm trying to impress upon you guys. Large-scale offensives, while flashy and they make headlines and you get news, they result in higher casualties. And the Russians are coming at this conflict with the approach of a winning formula, not winning the quickest formula, not winning the fanciest formula, but the winning formula, right? They know the numbers. They know they have the manpower advantage. They know they are killing more Ukrainians than the Ukrainians can replace. And eventually those lines will collapse. And then you can get the fancy offensives. Oklahoma in the house. Good to see some Oklahomans in here. All right, guys. I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. This has been episode 145 of Kalibrated with Scott. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please, if you are new here, click that subscribe button. If you are old here, I appreciate you being in here. Leave that like, leave a comment if you so wish. It helps me out tremendously. Just get seen by more people. I just want more people in this chat so I can get more questions and talk to you guys more. I really appreciate you all being in here, and I will see you on the next one. Be safe and have a fantastic weekend, everybody.